I want to do a quick recap over the last, kind of the heart of this whole series. We're calling Kingdom Come, but really it's a study of Epiphany, right? At the church year, so we join with billions of other Christians, for my good theologians that are out there, the good educated seminary grads that attend our church. You'll know this, right? So this is the time of the church year called Epiphany. Now, different churches may have different series with different titles and different names and hip graphics and cool this. I just used hip. Does that mean I'm old? Hip graphics. Cool, whatever it might be, but the truth is this is a time of year where we really pause to reflect on the reality that Jesus came not just to the Jew, but to the whole entire world, the Gentiles too. And the way we've done this through history is we pay attention to the Magi, kind of the first to the world, Jesus Christ to the world representatives. These were people from Persia. We talked about this a few weeks ago. People from Persia. We don't know if they were astronomers. We don't know if they were kings. We don't exactly know a lot about the Magi, but we know this. They made their way to the feet of Jesus. And people by the billions are making their way to the feet of Jesus still today. What is it that brought these people, we talked about this last week and then 2 weeks ago too, that brought billions of people to the feet of the cross? And we talked about this again, so just to recap it really quick. The two legs of the gospel are literally charity. So he sends them out to heal the sick, take care of the orphan, take care of the widow, to go out, right? So charity, and we define charity here as doing good unto others independent of their ability to reciprocate. So literally, this is not a business deal. Charity is not a business deal. You're not doing something good to somebody or giving to somebody or helping somebody out, thinking in your mind, this is going to be an investment for me back. That's not it, right? Charity is doing good to them independent of whether it will be reciprocated or not, whether it will come back or not. So the gospel started with this whole idea of sending them out to do charity. So charity, and then the second leg is the name of charity, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So all through the ages, billions with a B of people became followers of that country boy protagonist, Jesus Christ, by these legs: charity, gospel, charity, gospel. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, church history is littered with seasons where the church kind of leans on one and doesn't really pay attention to one side or the other. So there's times in church history where we would be like, we might even be in this a little bit today, where it's like, hey, Christians, do charity, but don't ever tell them why. Don't ever let people know why you're doing this. You know, if necessary, use words, which that quote's taken way out of context, but that's okay, right? Actually, it's not okay. It's wrong, right? So here it is, right? So we're going to do charity, but we're never going to tell you why we're doing it. And then there are times in church history, prior to this, where it's like we're going to send out missionaries, but we're not going to be nice. It's not going to be charitable. We're going to conquer. We're going to make you obey our beliefs. We're going to, right? So we have times in church history where we bounce on one leg or the other. But the real machine that changed the world, charity, gospel, charity, gospel, they go together. All right, with that in mind, let's go to today's message, the heart of our leader. This is out of John. We're going to look at John 2:13 through 17, and Alyssa did a great job reading the greater passage earlier. The heart of our leader, the heart of our leader, the heart of Christ. They say that the best illustrations are sometimes just the pastor's story. So I'm going to share a little bit of mine with you. It actually kind of starts off funny. About 10 years ago, maybe a little more than that, I was on vacation. And when I was in high school, so as you know, I have a little bit of a background in exercise science. I enjoyed that, doing personal training. And then I went to college and I studied philosophy and religion at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, so I did my first degree there. And during that season, those really big days of lifting weights and working out a ton, they kind of just declined a little bit. And after I got out of college, I got married and we went on vacation and we were playing on a beach and some of our family were taking pictures of us. And I was looking through the pictures of me out on the beach and I noticed out in the water while I was playing, I was like, wait a minute, what devil sorcery took my weight and moved it down here? And I was looking at the picture and I realized, oh my goodness, I got love handles. Like legitimate, come on, baby. Like right here they are. Come on, baby, that's probably not appropriate for church. But like love, I got legitimate love handles right here. How did this happen? How did this happen? And so I was looking at the picture, and truth be told, this is embarrassing to even admit in front of all of you people, but I've already done it first. I'm going to do it again in another service. I was ashamed. And so I graduated about 240, lifted weights a ton, was really in that world, and I had dropped a little bit of weight, but the weight had dropped that I had for sure. So even now, I try to stay under 200 pounds. So I do have to watch my diet. I do have to work out. I have to work to stay under 200 pounds. And so I've lost weight. But when I saw that picture, something in me clicked, and I was like, I need to get healthier. So I started eating better. I started dieting harder, right? I started getting really back into the gym again, and I have been ever since. I've kind of stayed in it by God's grace. And as I was going through that, God began to unpack something in me. See, here's the thing. What I was doing, you all would have said is good. Eating healthy and exercising. Why I was doing it, the Lord wanted to put into question. And that's going to be a big part of the next few moments as I share my story. And so I began to really realize, the reason I was doing this is because I really did want the approval of other people. And the truth is, the more I unpacked this approval of other people as being a driver for me, it really works to my advantage to be built that way. I mean, for those of you that have a little, like if you're not a true full people pleaser, but you can read people well and you can win them over. If you're built that way, you know what? It works for us. I can pitch ideas. I can connect people with things that I want to get done. I mean, it really has worked to my advantage personally to win people over and to like people's approval. And as I was kind of doing that, so getting in shape, the reason I'm getting in shape uncovers this whole new thing, and then winning people over. I mean, from the outside, it looks like I'm doing a good thing, but God drills down again on the reason why I'm doing those things. And so he drills down even further, and it goes beyond the people, and then God makes me very aware that I have tied my worth into accomplishments. And the truth is, I love to accomplish things. I am a driver. I do want to win. And it's a work to my advantage to be built that way. I mean, my goodness, from deciding to get into better shape again to getting another degree or it doesn't matter what it is. I've always just driven, push in, and people cheer me on from the outside. That's awesome. He's winning people over. He's taking ground. He's making it happen. I've always been a driver by nature, pushing and going further in. And everybody cheers it on, but God drills it down deeper to the why behind the what. Then he uncovers stuff that's not good there too. And here it is. My identity, for far too long, has been in my accomplishments and wanting people to be amazed at what I do. And then something really dark happened. I began to connect with people that had accomplished the things that I wanted to accomplish. And here's if you're young, if you're like different stages of life, you're going to understand this differently. God, by your grace, help this to come across clear, because different ages and stages are not going to understand necessarily what I'm saying, especially younger people. When you are young and you're in your 20s, you really do think your objectives that you want to gain are going to make you happy. Like you think, once I get married, it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to be whole and complete. Like, I'm never going to, battle with lust. I'm never going to struggle with anything. I'm never going to have, you think that's going to happen. Let me let you in on a secret. It's not. Right? You think it's going to change everything. You think once you get that job. You think once you finish that degree. You think once you make X amount of money. You think as a young driver. And I was built that way. I am built that way by nature. You think once you accomplish all these tasks, it's going to make you whole. And even before I had accomplished all the things I was after, I began to meet people who had. And I discovered something that made me sick to my stomach. They are not okay either. They're not. Sitting down across the table from a multimillionaire that I'm trying to learn from. And I realize his marriage is in turmoil, his life is a mess, and so are all his friends. And he just medicates it with more stuff over and over and over again. And I think, oh man, That's my finish line. And I sit down, I meet with somebody else who had finished all of their doctoral work and is all this written material and highly admired, and I hear about what's going on in his own heart and life and things he's battling with internally, and I think, oh man, that's my finish line. And then I sit down with somebody else, all the way down the line, I'm even in the gym, I'm hanging out with a guy that's in incredible shape, shredded from head to toe, and I'm listening to what's going on in his heart, and I'm thinking, that's my finish line? And I had this sickness in my stomach as I realized this. I cannot make a fountain big enough to satisfy my soul. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then what happens if you're like me, and you may not be built like me, that's okay. Some of you, when you realize this, you just turn off. When I realize this, I want to ratchet everything up another notch. So you know what that means? Learn more. Take more online classes, read more books, be even more strict with my diet, be even better with finances. I may just want to ratchet it up to another level. And the more I do that, the more I realize it's not working. And I'm seeing in front of me the evidence that it can't work, that there literally is a hunger in me nothing in this world can satisfy. I'm wanting more than what this world can offer. And maybe the best way to say it is this. I realize that I need the Creator to be bigger than His creation in my heart. I needed the Creator to be bigger than His creation in my heart. So what I did is I started fasting. I stopped. Not just food, but other things. All the noise, see, it's like between what can actually make me fulfilled and where I'm at, I filled all of these little activities that are trying to make my heart whole, and so many of them were there, and I started just pushing stuff aside. Stop writing all these blogs or writing for a newspaper or doing all these different things that I'm trying to gain attention or credit for. Push it aside, push it aside, push it aside, push it aside, because somewhere in my heart, I am finding that deep down in my soul, what I really want is I want to have an amazing, life-changing, awe-inspiring moment where I lock into the Creator of the universe. I want the awe of God. Nothing else can fill my heart. Like a fireman, I wanted to go to a fire hydrant in a spiritual sense, and I just wanted to lock into the grace and presence of God and crank it open, however they do that, and be filled by the only thing that doesn't run dry, that isn't a limited quantity and doesn't run out, the maker of the universe, the one who is love itself. I need more, and I had to push things aside to see it. I want to pause on that thought. John 2, 13 through 17. This text that I'm about to read, that Alyssa read just a little earlier, is a text. I actually had a guy in my office, this is maybe 11 or 12 years ago, a guy in my office who said he didn't want to continue being a Christian because of this text. All right? It's controversial. Some Christians don't like it. The truth is, this is like the only scripture, it appears, though it wasn't, that Jesus lost it. So this guy, Jesus meek and mild, turn the other cheek. This is a scripture where he just brings the heat. He lets go, okay? And a lot of people don't like this verse. Now, as I've studied it, it's become one of my favorites. Let's read this. The Passover of the Jews was at hand. Okay, so remember, we don't just read the scripture with our eyes. We don't just hear the scripture with our ears. We can use a much deeper awareness. It's okay to pause and use your imagination and work through this. So imagine the Passover. The temple is filled with people. They're coming. There's all this activity and noise and exchange is happening. Imagine this in your mind. The wardrobe, what they're wearing, the attire, the sandals on their feet, right? These priests that are wearing all this extra stuff. Imagine the sound of animals and the smell of a barn. Imagine all this taking place, okay? Read with your imagination. The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And in the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. And he told those who sold pigeons, "Take these things away. Do not make my father's house a house of trade." Now listen, I am not saying this is how you should handle conflict in your small group. Right? Like the next time in your small group and your small group leader says something you don't like, don't just like stand up and be like, "What did you make that for? I don't want to eat that," and make a thing of whips and drive them out of your house with it. That's not the right way to handle conflict. There's something deeper happening here. In most cases, right? So here we go. The deeper thing. Verse 17, his disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So what's taking place? Is Jesus really violent? What is actually happening? There is so much in this piece of literature, especially historically, contextually. I could spend weeks on it. What is the temple? Why did it end up the way it is? Why were they exchanging Roman currency? Why were they using pigeons and different animals instead of? Why was all this stuff happening? It is complex and deep, and I do not have time to go into all of it today, but I am going to talk about two pieces of it. Jesus walks into the middle of all of this activity in the temple. The religious leaders had manipulated the purpose of the temple in a few ways. Don't miss these. They were using people's hunger for God and the exchange of Roman currency as an opportunity to make money. They literally had monetized the people's hunger for God. They had figured out a way to make money off of people's hunger for God. Listen, I do think that Pascal is right, Blaise Pascal. There is a God-shaped vacuum in the hearts of all men. We are all hungry for something more than what this world can satisfy or give us. And for the first time, as a guy who's reaching about 40, I understand how achiever, driver personalities, I get how they could start drinking just to numb the hunger because you can't satisfy it. There's not enough in the world to satisfy it. So you want to find ways just to turn it off. I get that struggle. I don't drink at all, by the way. No alcohol in our home. But I can understand that desire to mute the hunger because you don't know how to satisfy it. And that hunger is built into us. And what Jesus walked into is a group of religious leaders that figured out how to take people's hunger for God and make a ton of cash off of it. The next thing that happened is this. Jesus walks into it not as this just happening. They had brought their business. Boy, this is a really big deal. And I wish I could spend a whole morning just talking about this. They had brought their business into the temple area that would have been reserved for the Gentiles, functionally saying there is no room for you. Okay, so you have to remember, the way God originally set up his people, they were to be a royal priesthood, literally an example to the world of where God is and how to meet with him and relate with him right again. That's what the Jewish people were supposed to be. And so even in the temple, the way it was originally constructed, yes, it was the center of it. The Jewish people, the priests, but there was an outer court area that was for Gentiles, non-Jewish people, all the way back in the Old Testament. And the idea that God had was anybody who is searching with a real, true, genuine searcher's heart that really does want to know where is the truth, where is God, how do I be right with him? Even in Old Testament Jewish culture, there was a place for them to go where they could walk in and they could ask questions about God and who he is and learn about him and learn how to engage with him. There was a spot in the temple for it. And what Jesus walked into is not just them monetizing their hunger for God. He also walked in and realized that they are doing all of this in the spot that was supposed to be for the seeker Gentiles, literally driving them out. The good news isn't for you. It's for us. And I'm going to make a ton of money off this. So in the middle of all of this taking place, we see, now this is so good. When I start to really unpack this and learn this, it awakens just this awe and love of Christ at a whole nother level for me. Here's what happens. We see the relentless love of God. This recorded place of physical intervention by Christ was a profound statement. Don't separate people from God. Don't do it. The place where we see God most intense are the places where there are things inserted between God, the true thing that can satisfy our hearts, and seeking people. And where we see Jesus most passionate and most engaged is his deep hunger that people can find what actually satisfies their heart. All right, I want to pause for a moment because we need to create healthy boundaries in our theological understanding of the temple and money. People can walk away from this and they can go, oh, the church should never talk about money then. They should never talk about business. They should never talk about dealing. They should never talk about it. Jesus talked about money a ton. And the simplest, I'd love to do a whole sermon on this part too, but the simplest, kind of clearest, concise way, Dr. Harrison, Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, he made a real concise statement about money, okay? So it's not that God is mad that there was money in the temple. He was mad that they were using this exchange to separate people from God. So here is Harrison's statement. This is really important. From Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He says, we are commanded to support those who preach the gospel, Matthew 10:10, Luke 10:7, 1 Corinthians 9:6 through 14, 1 Timothy 5:17 through 18, and many more. That's just a few verses. And while we should enjoy the good things God has given us, we are also called to be generous to those in need. 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19, 2 Corinthians 8 through 9, and many other texts. Wealth can so easily become an idol, leading us to abandon the Lord. A good way to say it is this: you don't live generously because God needs it. He builds a system where you get to participate because your heart needs to mature in generosity and charitable love. Listen, here's the thing. One of the most important parts of your Christian maturation is you learning to have an ever-growing, softer heart for love, true charitable love. The gospel, man, this whole thing, generosity and charitable love. You've got to grow in that. And so God builds a system where he allows you to participate in generosity because it's good for your heart to have it grow tender and figure out how to work in that. The world is messed up and being charitable is difficult and people don't always respond right, but you have to keep growing a heart of generosity. All right, now in our Western world, boy, we do not have a seeker-sensitive church. There are so many times I have something in my notes and I think as soon as I say that, somebody's going to leave the church. Here's one of them. If you are not living generous and you call yourself a Christian, there is something very wrong with your faith. Think of the home I grew up in. I have a couple of degrees from Bible colleges, 2 different ones. I've grown up with brilliant scholars. Parents have taught me. I've been through the Bible inside and out. I'm telling you, living generously is a mark of a real Christian. And if you are not living generous and you call yourself Christian, there is something wrong with your faith. There's a part of it that needs surgery, charitable love and generosity, and God gives you a machine to help grow it through generosity. Listen, so it is absolutely okay to talk about money in church. It is not okay to say that money is what keeps a person from God. Like, you need to pay. You need to pay to get to God. That's not it. God comes to you right where you are, but once he gets to you, he's going to shape your heart, and part of that is going to be through your finances too. The engine gets switched around, and they did that then. All right, I'm going to keep trucking through this. Then we move back, we migrate over as we work through these ideas, and I want you to notice how the author of John says it. It was out of Christ's zeal for God's house. If you read further, and Alyssa did cover this, if you read further, you will basically see the Pharisees say, what right do you have to mess up our system to Jesus? Think of how profound that is. Go to the next one. Let that sink in. In the house of God, they can't see the heart of God. And I think this is true even in churches today. You are in the house of God, and you're missing the heart of God. You may be well educated in the house of God and be missing the heart of God. And the heart of God is reconciliation. He wants that relationship restored between lost people and himself. The glorious news all people need in that day is the same message we need today. God wants you for your own sake. He wants you for your own sake. Then comes Jesus in the middle of all of this tension. Then, in the middle of all of this noise and tension, now. Both back then and now. And he drives out all the noise and proclaims he is the temple, the place where people can meet God. I'm going to invite Josh up and I'm going to pull all these ideas together in the next few minutes. Back to my story. I thought to be whole, I needed better work, a better body, more knowledge, more fans of Mike. I thought I needed more money, bigger accomplishments. I thought I needed more. I worked so hard to ratchet it up. What I actually needed was all the noise driven out so I could stand before Christ and finally see him clearer. Little did I know, it wasn't more but less activity that would help me see satisfaction better. I don't think what most of you need today is more information about God, but the powerful presence of him in your life. I don't think what most of you need today is more information about God, but the powerful presence of him in your life. Some of you desperately need to lock on to the creator of the universe and experience the awe and the majesty and the glory of Christ himself, the love that he wants to pour out on you right where you are, right in your spot, still wrestling through stuff. He wants to come to you. And some of you, the most important thing that you could do is start fasting. Stop the noise and get before God. It might be fasting food. It might be fasting from always buying the newest shoes or the newest tech or the newest whatever. Stop the noise. Stop the distractions. It may for you fasting might be, I don't even know. Stop binging on Netflix. Turn off the noise. Turn off all of the distraction. Turn it off and just be in the presence of God and say, Father, wake up my spirit. I love this. There's an old parable. I don't remember the first time I heard it. I really don't. I grew up in Oklahoma a good chunk of my life. And Oklahoma, so I grew up around a lot of Native Americans. I have a real heart for Native Americans. My best friend growing up, true blood, coming from Oklahoma, his family had a home that they had had since like the Trail of Tears property out there. I have a huge heart for Native Americans. And so I learned a lot about them even in public education because of where I grew up. And it might be there, I don't remember where I heard this at first. But the parable goes like this, the parable of the river, the parable of the river. There's a story told of a river. Strong and confident. The river knew its power. It longed to find its own, but it knew its power. It had the capacity to cut through rock. It had the strength to reshape the land. The river knew its power. Both man and beast bowed before it to find life and drink of its truth. The power of the river knew that wherever it went, whatever it did, it knew its strength to carve and cut and reshape and make. It knew that people longed to be with it, that people had to bow before it. And the river, in its desire to find its own, made its way to the edge of an ocean of sand, a desert. And this powerful river comes to this edge, the desert's edge, and it wants to cross it. And no matter how hard it tries, it cannot cut through it. And the river calls out to the Maker and says, "Let me pass. Let me pass. And the Maker says, just let go. And the river and all of its experiences knew that its strength came from its power, its own might. So it worked harder and gave more and pushed deeper, trying so desperately to cut into the desert, but it could not make it. And finally, out of sheer exhaustion from all of its work, it relaxes and gives up. And in its relaxed state, the Maker reaches down and begins through the wind and the air to draw up the water. And in the peace, the Maker shapes it into the clouds. And the Maker calls out a gentle wind that blows the clouds across the vast desert to the edge of the ocean. And the Maker stirs the clouds again. And the river in new form begins to fall like a gentle rain into its own, into peace. I believe you cannot make a fountain big enough to satisfy your soul. You can't do it. And I believe that for most of you in this room, it is not more information that you need about God. You need a profound experience with Him, where you let go and just draw near into Him. Some of you, what you need to do is not more activity, but less activity. And stop the striving and the fighting and the wrestle. And you need to just give in to the Maker and let Him draw up you. Today, my prayer is not that you do more, but that you just pause and be in the presence of God. To turn off noise. My prayer is that He draws up out of you a new level of awareness and peace and love and wholeness to do what only He can do. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to have, Kathy's going to be up here and I'll be up here too. We're just going to be up here. And if in your heart you're going, man, I literally just desperately need the presence of God in my life, I want to pray that over you. That God would work in you in a profound way, His presence in your life. That God would awaken something deeper and more real. That you would drink deeper of what can actually satisfy. I just want to pray over the people that are hungry for that. And then after you are prayed over on either side, just a quick 30 seconds, that's it, 20 seconds. Then I want you to come over, and these candles that all represent somebody you're praying for. Remember, the heart of our God is reconciliation. You don't just receive it, but you then come and you pray that over this person, that they would find and experience the majestic grace of an all-powerful God that loves them. Don't just receive it. Pray it over somebody else. Don't just receive the gospel, proclaim the gospel and pray it over somebody else. You need to spend time in prayer in your own heart, and you need to spend time in prayer over the hearts of others. We are not a seeker-sensitive church. We are a church that is obsessed with helping Christians live life to the fullest and helping people see what a passionate follower of Jesus should look like. We are obsessed with empowering the saints of works of service. That's why we gather together. The same reason they did when it was first founded those couple thousand years ago. It is time to drink deeper. If you would stand to your feet, and if God's working in your heart and you just want to pray, just somebody pray, Lord, move in me in a powerful way. Kathy will be up here and so will I. And also pray over the people that need Jesus in their life too. Whenever you feel led, you can come forward. We just want to thank you so much for joining us online. If God's working in your heart, we would love to hear from you. Go to www.encountertrinity.com and make sure to look up our information and send us a message. We want to know what God's doing in your heart. We want you to know that you are loved by God and absolutely have a purpose.